All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I appreciate y'all very much. Probably can hear a little bit of noise here in the background. That's because we are recording this and streaming this live from Imperial Pizza, 1035 Abbott Road in South Buffalo. And I am joined by a very special guest here tonight from Imperial Pizza, former Buffalo Bill, lifetime Ohio State Buckeye, a spurner of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, my favorite school of all time. My man, Marlon Kerner. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
What's going on? I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me come on today.
Oh, I'm excited to have you, man. We had some wings.
Had
Here
some
at
wings.
Imperial.
Absolutely.
This is your first time here in Imperial,
My first
right?
time here in Imperial, yes.
What are your thoughts, man? It's a nice place. Big
I love
place.
the spot, big place.
Spacious.
I have a tomato allergy, so I didn't get to have the full experience because I would have had pizza and wings to go through and say, okay, this is my top whatever in Buffalo. But we had the medium and we had the Cajun, and I like the Cajun. I definitely put the Cajun up there. So
yeah,
I like a good dry rub wing.
Yeah,
like,
that was good.
Like
Yeah, for sure. Definitely good drive rub wing here at Imperial. I got Josh is here from Cover One.
Josh is here from Cover
Your
One.
podcast partner. You're in a podcast game with Cover One now. Tell everybody about that before we get into to our stuff today.
Yeah, so I wanted to try to get into the podcast space, and really there's a lot of people that do it right and talk a lot about Bills football. And so I wanted to do something that didn't talk about Bills football. So what do you talk about next? College football. And growing up in Columbus, living right there, being around Ohio State, and understanding what that atmosphere looks like. You know, everybody talks about the passionate fan base of Bills Mafia, and 100%, we have one of the best fan bases around in the NFL. But if you really want to see what football should be like, go to a Big Ten game. Go in the Midwest. Go in the SEC. Go down to the Swamp in Gainesville, and you'll see a whole totally different experience. And so we just wanted to really talk about what it was like to go through that college experience, get recruited, try to match up guests that also went through that same experience, and then maybe might have a slight tie to the Buffalo Bills, but more importantly, has a tie to the opponent that Ohio State was going to face on that week. So we got Donald Jones in one week. We had Jeff Burris come in and talk about it, and then we just started trying to bring other guys in and talk about what that experience is like. Jay Reamersma, when we talked about Ohio State,
really?
Michigan, yes.
Wow.
So that was really just fun to really talk through and really get that experience from the other side. From, you know, we were just talking about what it was like my week leading up to Michigan, Ohio State, and then what he was hearing and what he saw. And he was 3-1 against us, and I was 1-3, unfortunately. So
that still haunts you all these years later.
Still haunts me. So, you know, the podcast is called "What Happened on Saturday" with Marlon Kerner. So just a different, unique perspective to try to blend personal stories, but then also talk about just what that collegiate experience is all about.
Now, being here in Western New York, you know, living in Buffalo, being a former Buffalo, being a Buffalo Bill, you get asked about the Bills all the time. I'm sure all the time, obviously. So I would imagine that being able to do that show and just talk about college, even when we were having our wings here at Imperial, kind of going over what we might be talking about, it's like you almost kind of light up more when you get the opportunity to talk about
college football, because to me, college football is, I mean, I know NIL has changed and it's not the same of what I grew up on, but to me, that's like the fun. It's like, high school to me used to be the purest form of football. Like, it was, you play the game because you love it. You're trying to get to the next level. College was the next best thing, excuse me. And I just love talking about it because every game matters, right? Like, you lose one game and there's a chance you might not even get to play for the national championship.
Right.
So you see the passion, you see everything about it. You know, there's plenty of games where you're like looking at Bills games or even just NFL games in particular. Like, okay, if they lose this game, it's not over. Like, we still got a chance. Like, we just need to win the division. You know, it's okay if we lose a couple games, but in college, if you lose a couple games, like, that season is over, and there's talk about firing the head coach. So you get all that drama, and now you have NIL and the portal and everything else. I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like, this is a whole different dynamic that is changing the landscape of college athletics. So it's fun to talk about it because it's never been like that.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we get into some Bills stuff, we're going to get into some Bills stuff. So I got a corner on the show. So obviously I want to spend some time today talking about the current Buffalo Bills corner. So we'll talk a little bit about Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford and Kaiir Elam. I'll get your thoughts on Tre White. We'll talk some general Bills, of course, some big news going on this week, which we'll get into as well. But kind of want to go back to even before college. All right.
Okay.
So, because this interests me. All right. So I'm here. I live in Buffalo. I was born and raised in Buffalo. I went to Florida for 5.5 years for a handful of reasons. But one of them was because my son had an opportunity to go play high school football in Florida. In Florida, and I know you know this, it's a different animal down in Florida high school football.
That's the hotbed.
It really truly is. And he was a very good player, not an elite player, but he was a very good player, like a D2 level player. He had plenty of D2 offers. But I just remember being around, and every school had 3-4 D1 players, and every opponent, every time he played somebody, there was D1 guy. So if you're like a guy who likes to follow college football, Florida's a great place to be because you're going to see a lot of future college football players and some NFL players on that football field. And it just used to always fascinate me, growing up here in Buffalo, because I've always been a fan of high school, and I still am a fan of high school football in Buffalo. The rivalries, the passion is as good as anywhere.
Absolutely.
The talent, there's some top-end talent, but it's just from top to bottom. It's not the same as, say, Ohio, Texas, and Florida, and some other places like that. But anyway, it would be like big news if a kid around here was being recruited by a D1 school, whereas down in Florida, it was just like all the time. So
every day.
I never got to see coaches from other major colleges coming up here to Western New York often, whereas in Florida it would be around because I was at a lot of the practices and stuff. The kids, the coaches would be there at practice all the time. Anyway, back to you. So you grew up in Ohio. You went to Ohio State. So I mean, obviously you were a hell of a high school football player, right? You don't go to Ohio State, the Ohio State, if you're all right.
True.
If Marlon's
I liked football.
If Marlon was a decent corner, he ain't going to the Ohio State. That's what I'm saying. Kind of take people inside, and regardless of whether it was, in what was it, late 80s, going in the early 90s.
Early 90s.
As opposed to even now. I mean, some elements are obviously way different, but in terms of recruiting, but some of the aspects are still the same. What was it like? And I'm sure you got perspective when you became an adult and you've gotten older, but being a teenager and having major schools want you to go play football at their university, like kind of take us back to and bring us inside a little bit, what it was like to be recruited as a teenager on that level.
It was really cool. I'm not going to lie. It was an interesting experience because I did not play organized football until the 8th grade.
Really?
Yes. So I grew up in a single parent home. We didn't have a lot of money. So I always had a football in my hand. And I just remember just thinking like, I remember telling my mom at 4, like, I'm going to the NFL. And she was like, okay, you got to get an education. Like, I don't really care about anything else. Just get an education. Nah, mom, I'm going to the league. I'm going to be rich. Nope. You're going to get an education. So I kind of understood the point. And so when people ask me like, well, I want to go play in college. I want to go to the NFL. I'm like, well, you better take care of your grades because you're not going to the NFL unless you go to college. Like, simple as that. If you can't make it and at least do the minimum that you need to take care of in the classroom, you're not going to be in the NFL because they're not going to come find you on the sandlot and anywhere else and trying to a JUCO. They're not going to come find you. Like, you got to go and do the work and make sure you show you can take care of it and pick up those complicated playbooks. So for me, I was a high school quarterback. So my first experience of playing football, I go be a tailback. And I remember this because I'm playing Little League for the first time and I knew I could run fast because literally like the commercial where you see the guy throw the ball up and he chases after it. That's what I did all day. Like, that's all I did. And I got really fast at doing it and really good at doing it. Like, I could toss that thing up and let it go for like 20 yards. And I had enough speed to go get it.
Wow.
And I would throw the arc. I had that down. And then we would just play football with my friends in the neighborhood. We always played football. And I had friends that loved basketball and all these things. And I wouldn't play it. I'm like, nah, I'm working on football. And if it's 100 degrees outside, like it does get in Columbus, I'm outside by myself throwing footballs, running routes, doing all these things. And people are like, yo, you're crazy. Yeah, I want to go to the NFL. I want to get to the next level. So this is what I did. And so we played that my 8th grade year. And I remember playing tailback, and they kept talking about this guy named Pat Zill. And I'm like, okay. And so they're like, Pat's on vacation. Wait till Pat gets here. So they didn't really know that they put a bullseye on Pat's back because I was like, I cannot wait till Pat gets here. And they're like, well, you're fast now, and yeah, you might be a tailback, but they're gonna move you to fullback. Okay, we'll see. So I was waiting for Pat to get here, and they were like, Pat's fast, Pat's this, and they made us run a 40. And we put my hand down, and it was like, and that whistle hit, and I was like, bye, Pat. And everybody said, Pat's looking at me like, and I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm talking about like I beat him by like 3 yards in the 40-yard dash.
Really?
Like, good night, Pat. And so we ran another one, beat him again. And we ran like 10, 12 sprints. And every sprint, I beat him. Like, there was never going to be a chance he was ever going to beat me. And so after that, Pat was fullback.
How'd you know you were that fast, that young?
I knew I could run fast, and I always we did foot races. Like, it wasn't like I wasn't doing things and trying to do those little things. Like, my mom would put me in summer track.
I was gonna say, like, it was a natural.
I mean, naturally, yes, I could run fast. But it was just more of a, you kind of start realizing as you get a little older when you start, hey, let's race, and then you beat guys like, oh, okay, that was a little easy. And then somebody comes like, I'm fast, I'll beat you, and then you beat them. And so then the only person who really could give me any trouble was I have a twin. If people don't know, but I have a twin brother, so he was the one who gave me competition until about the 6th, 7th grade. Then it was just like, no, you're not going to give me any competition after that.
So how do you know? I mean, so you know you're fast. How about 8th grade football and playing tailback? You remember the kid's name?
Yep.
You had an X on him immediately.
Immediately.
How do you go from there to, like I said, being a recruit who ultimately stays in your home state and you go to Ohio State? Also, is there a sense of, because I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was a kind of shitty, mediocre high school athlete, but I'm thinking in my mind, if I was good enough to get recruited to go play somewhere big, I probably would have a huge ego. Like, did you have an ego when you were a teenager, at least? Like, what was your mindset?
I think there was a moment when I thought, okay, I'm really good, right? Like, I'm getting recruited. News people were out. Like, the stations were coming out. Like, okay, this is the next guy. But I had really good friends that had surrounded me. And I remember having, like, man, like, if something happens, man, we going to suck. And my friend was like, no, we wouldn't. And his name was Buster, Ron Cunningham, good friend of mine still, my best friend then.
Yeah.
And we were just talking through and just like, he's like, no. And my nickname then was Kern. So everybody was like, nah, Kern. And he was like, look, Kern. He was like, look, you're a talent. Like, definitely you make winning easy with you, but we got other people that'll come in and step up and play. Like, so don't think that this team just revolves around you. And I was like, oh, so it's like, and it was a quick little, it wasn't mean, it wasn't rude, it was not anything. It was just, he was able to hold me accountable.
Sure.
And from that point, I was like, oh, you got a point. Like, you're right. Like, I'm not that big of a deal, and I haven't proven anything yet. So I need to go prove some stuff. And so from that point, I was like, okay, whatever. It was like a quick little, it was like a little tiny little pen pop, like pop the bubble, like get the big head out of there. And from there, I was like, okay, let's go put in work.
How were like people around you, like family, friends? Like I said, you're a big time high school recruit. Like, was there?
They didn't understand.
Supportive, a little bit of jealousy.
They were supportive.
Maybe?
It was just myself, my brother, my mom. I had aunts and uncles that were in town, but they weren't really a part of that process.
Right.
Like, so it was just us, and I didn't really know what that process should look like, because it's different now, right? Like, you do you do the work. Like, you make your own highlight reels. You're contacting coaches.
Yeah.
Coaches hit you up on Twitter and they DM you and they're like, fill out this form. From back when I was in, it was all about really the coach. The coach had to say on who was going to get recruited, who could be seen. They filled out forms on your behalf. They were like, hey, I got a guy you need to come take a look at. And so my high school team was loaded, though. My high school team would be like South Park now. We played in the City League school. So it would be like playing Burgard and all those schools. Like, it would literally had a City League schedule. In Ohio, you had to have computer points. So you had to play enough tough schools to get you enough computer points that would then make you eligible to go to the state playoffs. And so we never were able to have enough computer points until my senior year. So I was the first class to lead my high school to the state playoffs, like the first City League school to ever make the state playoffs in Ohio, the way it was set up. And so we knew we had some tradition that we needed to uphold, and we were trying to build something. And I went to high school with Terry Glenn. I went to high school with another person that went to Ohio State with me, and Jason Glenn, and I also went to high school with his brother, Anthony Glenn. So the four of us came from one high school and went to Ohio State to play football.
That's
and
crazy.
his younger brother came and also went to Ohio State a few years later. And we had June Hindley, who went to Kansas. Ohio State recruited him. So I had a lot of talent within our facility and in my high school in particular that went D1 and in particular to Ohio State. And we know how Terry went, and he ended up being the number 7 overall pick to the Patriots. So I was his high school quarterback and then went to being a cornerback covering him in practice.
That is so
it's pretty cool
wild.
just to kind of think about the arc. But to get to that point, it was just a lot of hard work. And I remember being a tailback and going my freshman year and then looking at the 50,000 tailbacks we had because everybody wanted to be a tailback. And then looking at the 4 quarterbacks I had, like, oh, I can throw the ball. So I was like, I'm a quarterback. I'll be a quarterback. And I made the switch to quarterback. Then
sounds like you were always pretty grounded.
Yeah, I try to stay grounded.
It sounds like you've always been grounded. You mentioned recruiting now. Is it kind of wild to you the way recruiting's done now as opposed to like, when you were a kid coming up?
It's just crazy because literally, they're like, oh, come take an unofficial visit. Come do this, come do that. And you're like, it's all on your dime. It's like, do this, do that. I'm like, I don't know about that. And then you get all these official visits, and it's different. And if you're not careful, like I see some of the tweets where guys are like, hey, can I say that you gave me a scholarship so somebody else might offer me another scholarship? Like, no. It was just more of we didn't really broadcast it. I'm so grateful I didn't have social media. I don't know.
I was going to ask you that because another thing that I've seen in Florida firsthand with these high school recruits is they get offers up the ass.
Yeah.
And every day it's like, you'll go on their Twitter, so blessed to get an offer from wherever. And the next day, blessed to get, I'm like, holy shit. I mean, they're like, publicizing like literally every single offer.
And it's crazy because they'll make those offers knowing that you're probably going to say no, but they're going to make it because it makes them look good because somebody else might, oh, you recruited him too? I might come there too. That might get a guy that really want by doing that. So it's just interesting the way that everything is done now. Social media definitely plays a big role.
Sure.
So you got to get the exposure. For me, I think I went to Ohio State's camp my junior and senior year, and that's where I got the first exposure at being at Ohio State. And really what happened was I went to their camp between my junior and senior year, had a really good junior season, and I took my ACT early. And I passed it my junior year. Came out, got the right score on the ACT that I needed to say, okay, because back then I'm really old. So sorry to tell y'all folks that I'm really old. But
you look really good, by the way, for being as old as you are. I'm a year older than you, and I look like I'm half in the grave.
You used to have
you
to
look
have
like you're in your 30s
18,
still.
Right? 18 on the SAT or the ACT, and then like a 900 or 1,000 to be eligible to get recruited in college. So I took the ACT because you didn't get penalized for guessing back then.
You got to tell me the story. We talked about this a little bit over wings here at Imperial before the show. Notre Dame, I said sarcastically at the beginning, spurting Notre Dame. You had an interest in going to Notre Dame. Let people know about that, because I know there's a lot of people in this part of the region here in Western New York that are Notre Dame fans.
Yeah. So after I passed my test, then the offers really started coming because I was a nerdy athlete. So all my friends, we were all on the honor roll. We all ended up being inducted into the National Honor Society.
Wow.
So we were really nerdy athletes. Like we were oxymorons in our own right. And so once I got the SAT back, they're like, okay, then the floodgates opened. Then it was Ohio State started sending letters. Notre Dame sent letters. Every Ivy League school sent letters. Every military academy sent letters because they're like, hey, we heard you're a really good student athlete. I don't have to worry about you in the classroom. So we want to know if we want to recruit you. And so what they send you like the initial interest form, like, would you be interested? Can we come out? And then they're like, good luck this upcoming season. And then in between the summer, I went to Ohio State's football camp. And so I'm like, I'm there as a quarterback, second year in a row being there. Like, oh, remember you're a quarterback. But Ohio State makes everybody run 40s at the camp. And so they made me run a 40. And they're like, get down. I'm like, okay, well, how do you want me to run? And again, I'm not like, I wasn't savvy to all the track stance and everything. It was like, we'll get in a 3-point stance. I'm like, okay. So I was like, get down like this, like literally like hand in the dirt, kick your feet back. Like I had the stagger stance, like left foot, right foot. Like, here you go. Like this. He's like, yeah. Oh, okay. Got down, put my hand down, took off. He's like, okay, come back. He's like, pretty good. I'm like, well, what did I run? 4.4 flat. Okay. You got to run another one. All right, cool. So came back in, put my hand down. He's like, you ready? I'm like, yeah. So on your movement. All right. Boom. Run it again. All right. Yeah, really good. 4.4 flat. Okay. Like you can go back to your quarterback drill. And then I go back to my quarterback drill. So I'm over there, I'm doing like, we did all the warm up, you get on your knee, all the stuff you normally do.
Mhm.
And I'm doing that. And then the defensive back coach from Ohio State was like, hey, I heard about your 40 time. Let me talk to you for a second. I'm like, all right. And he's like, hey, you ever thought about playing corner? I was like, yeah, I played a little bit. Like, I played safety a little bit. Like, I understand how to play. He's like, go cover that guy over there. Okay. And he's like, I was like, how far do you want me to stand? About 8 yards is good. Okay. So I'm this little 17-year-old kid looking like, all right, and I'm sizing guys up like, look, all right, I know he can't outrun me. I know he's not going to beat me in this route, but I play quarterback. So I understood some of the splits. Like, okay, he's wide. This is a slant. Okay, he's tight. This is going to be an out. Okay, he's in the middle. This could be a hitch. This could be a 4 route, maybe a 7 cut. So like I'm going through my head like, okay, I'm guessing routes. Like I'm really out here guessing routes, and I'm freelancing.
Uh-huh.
And no technique, no anything, and I'm out here covering, but nobody caught a pass on me.
Really?
So I was like, you're not catching the pass on me, period. Like, this is not going to happen. And then he said, okay, after about 10 minutes of doing that, he said, hey, I think you can play corner at the next level. Can I recruit you? I'm like, yeah, I'll be open to it. He's like, I know you're a quarterback, but can I recruit you as an athlete? I think you can play corner. I'm like, sure. And that started my whole
That's how you
path.
went from quarterback to
And
corner.
that's how I went to corner. And I finished the rest of the season playing quarterback, went to the state all-star game. And Ohio State had a lot of pull, so they were like, "Hey, we don't know if we wanted to play quarterback or not." So they were like, "We wanted to play corner." So I literally went to the All-Star game and at the state of Ohio, and it was like, "We want you to play corner." And I had not played corner at all, and that was my first game playing corner. And then I got selected for the regional All-Star game in Columbus, and they were like, "Hey, I know you were an All-State quarterback, but we want you to play corner." I'm like, "Okay." And so I had 2 games at corner, and then went to training camp at Ohio State. And then that was it.
That is crazy.
And that's how I became a corner.
I know. Obviously, I know you went to Ohio State. I know you had an interest in Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame played the recruiting game. So I started taking them. I had a really good senior season, and I remember Ohio State always calling me like, "Hey, we want you there, And so we had a really big game my senior year, and we went against another one of my friends who ended up playing cornerback at Ohio State with me, and Ty Howard. He went to Briggs. We lost our first game to Luke Fickell, head coach at Wisconsin, who went to DeSales, which is another high school that was like literally a block away from my high school in Columbus.
Wow.
And Luke was a tight end. So we played against each other in high school. And then all of a sudden, we played this big game, and everybody's like, Notre Dame's going to be there. Notre Dame's going to be there. And I'm like, okay, Notre Dame's going to be there. And my coach, like, Notre Dame scout called me, said he's going to be there. He wants to come check you out. I wanted to be the next Tony Rice. So I was a high school quarterback. I'm like to be Tony Rice.
Love Tony Rice.
Tony Rice, right? So I get there, and we come in, and the opening snap, I drop back, and it parked like the Red Sea, and I take off, and I bust around for like 30-something yards. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a fun game. And we end up beating them, and they were talking trash all week too. Like, we can't, like, we going to smoke y'all, Marlon. Like, I can't beat y'all. Like, we got something for y'all. When the dust settled, I had 8 carries, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. And, and my tailback had another 20 carries, another 149 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Like, we ran all over them. Like, it was 35-14. It wasn't even close. But I remember just like, yeah, we about to get y'all. And then that just like kickstarted the rest of our season. We went to the state playoffs. We won our first game, lost to another Ohio State guy and Matt Finkus. Like, we had so much talent in Ohio then. And Ohio State was really good at keeping talent in-house and in-state. And so when it came down to the recruiting process, Notre Dame, Ohio State's like, we want you. And then I was waiting. I took my visit to Ohio State early. I went to Indiana. I should have took that visit to Hawaii because Hawaii wanted me to come. I was like, I should take this visit. I should take this visit. Man. I didn't. I don't know why I did not take it. So anybody that's listening, if you're going through the process, take all 5 of your visits, especially if Hawaii wants you to come, go take that visit. Definitely go do that. And then all of a sudden, Ohio State like called me. It's like, hey, we want you. And I said, you know what? I'm waiting for Notre Dame. I don't hear anything. And I'm listening to the news, and I hear that Notre Dame gets a commit from one guy, but then a guy goes to Michigan. And so I'm like, oh, cool. And so I committed to Ohio State like on a Wednesday, just out of the block. Called him like, I'm coming. That's it. And I get all the coaches calling me, and everybody's there. And so I'm sitting there like, and I'm good with the decision. And then who calls an hour later? Notre Dame.
Not really. That
like,
close?
Hey, yep. Literally an hour later, like I commit to Ohio State. I talked to Coach Cooper. I talked to everybody. And Notre Dame calls an hour later, like, hey, I know it's late in the process. We would love to get you down for a visit. I'm like, I'm sorry. I committed to Ohio State today. So
wow.
good luck with everything.
Oh.
And that was it. And that was I didn't think about it. I didn't think twice. I took all the letters down. Because if anybody that knew me knew I was going to Notre Dame. I had senior pictures with Notre Dame gear on. I had every Notre Dame letter in my locker. I had their yearbook in my locker. Like I had their hats and everything posted up in my locker. Like you open it up, it's like a shrine to Notre Dame.
Wow. See,
so they missed out. They missed out.
I knew you once you got to the NFL, obviously, but see if you went to Notre Dame, I would have known you a couple of years before that. Because, like I said,
Absolutely.
I'm just a big Notre Dame fan. All right, so I'm surprised to learn that you didn't play organized football to 8th grade.
Yep.
But that's not unprecedented. It's rare, but
It's
unprecedented. I'm stunned to learn that you were playing quarterback and you didn't even play corner.
No.
At all.
At all.
Until pretty much the end. Wow.
I had 4 years of playing corner in college. That was it. Like I had to learn the position on the fly.
That is crazy. So there's a lot of young adults right now getting ready for the draft, training for the draft, hoping their name is going to get called. Some know it's going to, some aren't sure. They don't know where they're going. Spend a few minutes talking about the process of, so you're done playing at Ohio State. You're getting ready for the NFL. You were invited, so you were at the combine.
Went to the combine.
How did the combine go for you?
It was an interesting experience because they lost my luggage when I went there. So
really?
You didn't get I was like a little crop duster flying from Columbus to Indianapolis, and we get off and I was in that area where everybody wore Timberlands and everything. So I had like my little boots on and I'm walking in the plane and I'm in the airport and I go get my luggage, like they lost it. And they're like, okay, well, we'll bring it to you, no problem. But the only problem with that was they sent me right there to the combine. So they're like, okay, when you get in, you got to go here. We're going to do some testing. So I had to do like all these leg extensions and everything, but I'm doing them in Timberland boots. So, and I don't even think about it. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, they're like, you can take them. I'm like, I'll keep them on. There's no problem. So I'm in there like doing these, they put you in the machine and like, they're like, okay, do this weight. And like, you do it as many times as you can rep out. Okay, do this weight and do it as many times as you can rep out. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm doing this I'm doing it in ankle weights, in essence. And
that's nuts.
So I do that and I do some other testing and then they go like, we'll get your luggage. We'll bring it to your room. So I come back and I make the rounds and then I come back around and my luggage is there, but then I got to run the next day and my legs are shot because I didn't even think about like, hey, take it easy on this. Like, don't do that. Like, too crazy. So I'm going at it because I want to prove that I can do it. And I'm like crazy weights. Like, go higher. I can put that higher. Do more. Put more in. So I'm like, oh, legs are heavy. So I didn't run great the way I run too. But the difference is you couldn't run in like they have light shoes now. You got spikes. You can do all these things like. So we would train the waffle racers and all these light shoes, and you get to the combine and they won't let you wear them.
Oh, really?
So yeah, you couldn't wear them. They finally changed the rule a little later. So I was like, this sucks. So I remember running in a pair of Dion's. And like I have these Dion's, I'm like, okay, these shoes are heavy. Like I don't know why I decided to run in these shoes. These shoes suck. So that's what I'm trying to run in. And I run terrible. I run terrible. Like it's just terrible. Not that I knew it. I was like, okay, but I'm like, I'm not even worried about it. For me, it was more of the interview process. Like, can I go show teams what's going on? Can I explain the up and down season that I had as a senior, and answer any questions they might have? Like I played the entire season with a separated shoulder. I was supposed to miss 4 games, like 4 weeks. I missed 4 days of practice, and then I put like a pad on it and just played. And I couldn't bench the entire season. Like I literally could not do this all season long.
Wow.
So I would close grip bench because I could get here, and I did that all season to stay strong, try to keep some strength in it. And that so those were all things I could tell people like, hey, listen, I played with a grade 3 separated shoulder the entire season. And it hurt like heck. I was getting shots at the beginning and then I just got used to it and it stopped hurting. But those were all the things that I got to answer at the combine.
How surprised are you at what a spectacle the combine has sort of become? Like say when you went there, mid 90s. I mean, it was big. I'm not saying it wasn't big. It was big then too.
But it wasn't on NFL Network.
Right. You're right. Like everything is live now. You watch the entire combine, hours and hours and hours a day at the combine. Thousands of media converge in Indianapolis every year. They go to the combine. It's such a spectacle now. How important also is the combine as opposed to say your career at Ohio State or wherever you went to school, your tape, maybe going to a Senior Bowl, whatever, but how important is the combine in your opinion in terms of the overall process where these prospects end up?
I think it's really important, especially if you are somebody that's perceived as being less than from a less known school. Like if you're making the jump from say Division 2 or an HBCU school where they're like, hey, the competition is not the same. Your first step is you want to try to get to like the Senior Bowl to show that you can play.
Okay.
Right. So I went to the Senior Bowl, show I could play. And then the next step was the combine. And then you can go and show, like, look, I'm going to go run. I'm going to go test. It's another way to kind of, I looked at it as another step in the process. I knew it wasn't the end all be all because then the next step is then your pro day, right? So I understood like the process was do well in the Senior Bowl. Okay, I did well there. Do well in the combine. Didn't run the way I wanted to run, but I tested the way I wanted to test. And I got to answer a lot of questions and really touch base with the GMs, the people who going to make the decision.
The interview process is very important for the combine still to this day.
Still to this day.
Sure.
Because that's how they got to get to know you and kind of get to say, okay, you know what, this dude would be a good fit. Because they already know you can play football. Like, and that's the thing I told them, like, oh, don't worry about that. No, they already know you can play football. Like, they're looking for an anomaly. They're looking for the guy that's going to run a 4.2 at 6'5", 330 pounds, right? Like if that dude can run a 4.4, like, woo, okay, now he's going to go up the board and everyone wants to talk to him. They know you can play football. It's can you explain this? Can you explain your body language? Can I assess your football IQ? Can you pick up my terminology? Can you recite it back to me? Do I have to worry about certain things? So they're all judging, and sometimes guys don't understand that everything is a test. But I knew that going in, everything's a test. The way you sit, the way you talk, the way you make eye contact, the way you shake your hands, everything is a test because they're judging you. And so I knew that going into it, like, all right, this is always a test. This is the next part of the step of the process and the journey. And then I knew, okay, after that. And so they were like, do you have any questions for us? Like, yeah, what do you see me? Like, what do you think? Would you think I'd be a good fit for your program? And then I was like, I asked everybody, like, hey, on an unrelated note, I'm thinking about running track. Do you think it'll hurt in this process? No, I think you should do it. Go ahead and do it. Enjoy it. I was like, I'm still in school. I'm working on getting faster. I know I got to do something for my pro day. So I look forward to seeing you there. But yeah, go ahead and run. So I ran track my senior year at Ohio State too.
Wow.
So that was it. And that's how I made the decision by asking like all the GMs that said, hey, let me have a conversation with you.
What was the feeling like going into the draft? Like in terms of your nerves?
Nervous.
Obviously, you go to Buffalo. You know, you're third round pick by the Buffalo Bills. So kind of a two-part question. Like maybe take us inside that 24-hour span or so before you end up ultimately getting drafted by Buffalo. And also, what did you know about Buffalo before the draft? And what did you find out quickly when you got to Buffalo? Because you're talking about getting drafted by a team that was what? I think maybe a year and a half
removed from the Super Bowls.
Going from their fourth straight Super Bowl.
So I didn't even know Buffalo was interested in talking to me because I never had any conversations with anybody from Buffalo. Like I had no clue. They didn't talk to me. I think I did talk to them maybe in the draft process briefly. It wasn't at the combine, but like when they would come to school, they didn't say anything. I think the closest thing they had was on my pro day. I got to go there. I was ready for it. Like I was ready to go. And I ran a 4.35, 40. Like, cause I was like, I know I can run fast. I was like, I know I can run fast. So I just need to show you. And so that was it. Like I was like, okay, I ran the speed I wanted to run. Also on the same day that Joy Gallo ran a 4.17. So he really stole all my thunder because everybody's like doing like this. I'm like, really, dude? Like, I just run a 4.35. I'm walking back and you running. I was like, ooh, that's fast. Like I can tell. I was like, I know that's fast. And everybody's like this. You see people looking at like, oh my gosh, like, and they're like 4.17, 4.19, 4.2 flat. I'm like, thanks, Joey. Thanks for stealing my thunder. Like, I really just ran a 4.3 over here, and you just stole my thunder. But the Bills were like, hey, what'd you eat? And I was like, I ate pancakes this morning. It was like, you should eat pancakes all the time. And I was like, that was the only conversation
Really?
I had with them. And then you just kind of go through the process. Like the draft was one day. Like, I don't think people understand. You talk about the spectacle, like it starts on a Thursday, then you have a Friday night and a Saturday and then Sunday morning and all that. Like literally it started at 12 noon on Saturday.
Yeah.
Mel Kiper and everybody would come on. So I'm sitting here like, look, this is going to be a chill process. Like, I'm not sure where I'm going to go. They're like, you're going to go anywhere from 3 to 7. And there's like more than likely 3 to 6. I'm like, okay. Like, so my agent's like, you may go on the first day, but more than likely you probably go on the second. And Denver was really the team that said, hey, we don't have any first day picks. But if you're available on day 2, we're going to take you with our fourth pick, our fourth round pick. I'm like, okay, cool. So I was like, I'm going to be a Bronco. I was already a Broncos fan growing up. I know, sorry, Ohio fans. Like, I love the drive.
Pretty random.
I
All
love
right.
the drive. I love the
why.
drive part too. I was probably the only Ohioan like celebrating that victory for the Denver Broncos. So I was like a Broncos fan. Like that was my team, Orange Crush defense. Like I loved it. Like so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Denver. This is gonna be cool. So I literally was like, look, I'm just gonna watch my friends get drafted. Like I'm no pressure on me. I was like, I'm gonna have a cookout. I had my friends come over. I went to the store, got like some steaks and everything. Like threw them on the grill. Like that was it. Like we just gonna hang out and watch the draft with family and friends. And so my aunt, like in Ohio, we had that's when the draft was on ESPN until like 7:00, and then at 7:00 it cuts off and it went right to ESPN2.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so they didn't play like, hey, you can now watch the draft on ESPN2, and it would come like gone. Like there you go. Like there's no fade, there's no ESPN news until you can get it. It was like ESPN and ESPN2, and we had the sports channel in Ohio. And I was like, you have ESPN2? Yes, I have it. I'm like, and so I'm mad because at my apartment I had ESPN2, but I go to my aunt's house to watch a game, and she doesn't have ESPN2. So I'm laughing like, okay, so I'm just literally watching the ticker because they had the ticker on ESPN and they play all the other sports, and the ticker would go by, and they're like, we're in the third round. So I'm like, oh, well, I could get drafted like this round. So I was like, I'm sitting there watching it, and then friends of mine was like, let's go bowling. Oh, cool, let's go bowling. So I'm like, well, let me check and see what the draft is. And I walk down and I'm looking at the ticker and it's just going across like third round, like, oh, cool. And then my cousin out of the blue just calls me like, Marlon. I'm like, what? She's like, telephone. I'm like, well, who is it? Like, I didn't hear the phone ring. And she's like, I don't know, some dude from the Buffalo Bills. And that's how I found out I got drafted. Like, she was like, some dude from the Bills, and the whole house goes quiet. Dwight Adams gets on the phone and he's just like, Marlon Kerner? I'm like, yes. He's like, congratulations. Now, if anybody knows Dwight Adams, he has the hardest country drawl that there is. And he's like, congratulations, you're a Buffalo Bill. And I was like, cool. And then I hug my mom, I hug everybody else in the house, and then I came like, all right, we can go bowling now. And I sat and went bowling. That's what I did. Like I went bowling, and then it was like surreal. Like I'm bowling. We're just hanging out with my best friend Buster was there. My brother was there. We're just all hanging out. Like we went bowling and hung out and just kind of talked to like, man, can you believe you just got drafted? I'm like, no. He's like, we've been talking about this since we were little kids, like since we were 13. Like, yeah, I'm like, this is crazy. And then that was it. Then I got to come to minicamp. And so I didn't know too much about Buffalo. I knew it was cold. I know that much, but I knew I had driven through Buffalo to come visit my mom because my stepdad was in the Air Force. So they were up in Rome, New York. So I knew it was close enough to Rome. Mm-hmm. So they were kind of like, they get a lot of snow. You kind of get this. I knew they still had Jim and Thurman and Andre and Bruce. So like, okay, the big four is here. So I'm like, all right, this is kind of cool. Like, and I knew they went to 4 straight Super Bowls. So I'm like, oh, but then I'm looking at the roster like, oh, Jeff Burris. So I know Jeff Burris because Jeff was in the book when I was learning Notre Dame's roster of guys that I was like, that would have been my teammate. So I was like, oh, I know who Jeff Burris is. And I was a big fan of Jeff Burris in college because, you watch other guys. I'm like, oh, nine is for real. Like that dude, he's good. So I kind of knew some of those guys. You're looking at the roster like, oh, cool. But then I got drafted with Ken Irvin, and we were at the Senior Bowl together. So I knew Ken. We were really good friends. We struck up a friendship. Like, well, good luck. So I'm like, oh, I know somebody already from another school. I played against Ruben in college, so I knew who Ruben Brown was. Played against Todd Collins. So like I'm looking at it. Played against John Holacek, who was a 5th-round draft pick in that draft. So I was like, this is kind of a cool little process of people that I'd already crossed paths with that I knew. So I was like, this is fun. Like, so all right, I know people already.
I want to ask you one more question about that time and that era, which will kind of lead into a couple questions I got about this current roster, just with turnover. All right, so you get to the Buffalo Bills. I think it was 96. Jim Kelly gets hurt. You guys lose to Jacksonville in the playoffs. That's Jim Kelly's last game. You mentioned Todd Collins. The hope, the expectation, or the hope, I should say, at least was that he was going to be that next guy to take over the team. Talk about that team at that time when it's the end for Jim, the press conference. That, the Super Bowl run, that era of the Bills football, those guys, I mean, some were still around for a little couple years after that, but that era of Buffalo Bills football ended at that point when Jim Kelly retires. Talk about like that locker room and that vibe at that time when you realize, and other guys I'm sure realize, that not that the Bills are not going to stink all of a sudden, but like, that era of this organization is coming to an end and it's time for new leaders and new guys to start to step up. Just talk about like that time frame. Like what was it like being a Buffalo Bill during that time when Jim, he's at the end of the road there?
I think as a fan base, the fans like, oh my gosh, Jim is gone. Like, we're gonna suck, right? Like, 'cause that's the first thing. Like, oh my gosh, like it's Jim. He's been a staple of what Buffalo Bills football was. He's the face of the franchise. We didn't look at it like that. We looked at it as like, okay, as a player, your time is going to come. I think for Jim, he got the blessing to be able to go out on his own terms. He got to say, I'm done, and he walked away on his own. Like, he didn't come back and be like, I didn't have the fastball velocity. I didn't have this anymore. Like, it was, all right, I'm done. I'm walking away. And so I respected that. Like, because I didn't get that opportunity. Like, most guys get forced out, right?
Right.
And so from that standpoint, like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, I hope I get the opportunity to do that. But you also had strong leaders already in the locker room. So I didn't think too much of it because I was like, all right, well, you still have Andre.
Sure.
You still had some really good players on the offensive line. You still had John Fina and those guys that were still around. So, you had Ruben playing guard. Like, I'm like, offensively, like, if we can come in, you still had Thurman as a tailback and Derek Holmes as a 1-2 punch. Like, so
he's a good running back, too.
Like, you weren't thinking about, like, oh my gosh, like, this could be the end of an era. Like, you're kind of like, okay, it's going to look different. But if Todd can be that guy and can kind of really kind of like, it wasn't even, I didn't need him to be like Jim Kelly. Like, you're just kind of thinking like, if Todd can come in and manage it and like we can run the ball, we know we can do those things, and he can kind of, the K gun might be gone. We might have more of a pace offense and do some things like, I think we can get back, but it never materialized, right? And again, it's always like when you draft a guy thinking for a certain fit, and then when it changes, like you changed up a lot of stuff on Todd. Like you had him in a K gun style offense, and all of a sudden you put him in, a different style of offense. You're going wing back, wing T, doing all these things like, 2 tight end formations. And so that's a little bit of different type of thing for him. And I feel like maybe we moved on quickly because, he only had 1 year to start. And you're like, oh, this is not it. And so, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, we like Rob. We gonna go sign Rob, and you bring in Doug Flutie.
A lot to get him too,
all of a sudden you're like, oh shoot, like, okay, bye Todd. Like, so, those are things where you look at like, okay, I don't know if they gave up too soon or not. Todd had a really good career as a journeyman backup and played in the league for a long time.
Sure.
So, and it's mine, and he won some games with Washington and did some things for them. So, I think every player is different. But to answer your question, like, you had Henry Jones. We still had guys that could come in like, hey, this is how we're going to do things. This is how it's going to look going forward. Bryce Pop was still in that locker room. You had signed Jim Jeffcoat. So on the defensive side, Bruce was still there.
Sure.
Like, we're thinking like, okay, we're going to be good. Like, it's not going to be an issue. It's can the offense score points? And that ended up being kind of like the Achilles heel that season. We just couldn't score enough points to overcome some of those obstacles.
Sure. All right, we are here live at Imperial Pizza in South Buffalo. Marlon Kerner, former Buffalo Bills corner, is with me. Banged out some good wings here before starting the show. By the way, Imperial Pizza, the best lunch special in town. I promise you, bro.
Okay,
you can get.
I'm coming here for lunch.
I'm telling you, man. You can get like 5 wings and a beef on wet sandwich and a pint of beer for like $12-13. It's just ridiculous. It's amazing. Anyway,
lunch tomorrow. I know I'm coming for lunch tomorrow.
I wanted to talk about the Bills corners here, the current ones. Actually, let's start with a former one, okay? Because Tre White, when he got released, we talked for a couple minutes while we were eating our wings. That wasn't a surprise. It was kind of, you knew it was coming. It's sad. The injuries, and you would know about, significant major injuries. He was so beloved in this community. And again, you still live here. You're part of this community.
Yes.
You know this. Talk about what he meant, what you think he meant to this organization on the field as a leader, as a great football player before when he was healthy, and also off the field. Again, a beloved teammate, really good in the community, funny as hell.
Real fun.
Yeah, man. What happened to him sucks. I know it's a business.
That's the business, and that's the thing that sucks, right? Because you always think about, like, we talk about Tre White, like, again, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like the first pick in the Sean McDermott era is Tre White. Like, we trade back, and that pick ends up being the pick we traded from ends up being Mahomes for KC, and we go back and we get Tre. I want to say at 19 or so, a little bit later than that. And so I'm like, okay, great dude, does everything that you want to do. Came in, immediately worked, did the hard work, really ingrained himself in this community. And what it means and what it's supposed to look like to be a Buffalo Bill, blue collar, like, right, like the work ethic off the charts. Like, you knew you didn't have to worry about anything with him. Started out strong, Pro Bowl player, gets rewarded with the contract, and you see the tears of joy on his face when he like, I get to take care of my family. I get to tell my mom,
Oh.
like, you're taking care of, like, you know, you're like, this is what the dream of putting in the sacrifices, the hard work, everything that he went through growing up in Louisiana and everything coming through. And you're like, okay. And then he gets there. And then he tears his ACL. I'm like, okay, if he can come back from that. And I remember everybody's like, you know, man, Tre need to come on. Like, he's taking too long. I'm like, no, trust me. I'm like, you do not want to be the guy that rushes back from the ACL injury, because I know, because I rushed back from the ACL injury. I rushed back and I tore the other ACL. So I'm like, I respected them so much what the Bills did about, nope, take your time. And people's like, no, physically he'd be fine. Like, no, you don't understand. Like, there's just a little bit that it's off a little bit. Like, your gait changes, your back pedal changes. When you step, your proprioception of where your foot's going to be is a little off. And he has to get that back and be able to do and trust that when he steps, he can go here and do this. Like, and that takes time. And you don't do that in practice and then think it's going to translate into full speed in a game. Like, you need to do that repetitiously over and over and over. And so I love that they took a long time. And then he came back, it looked like he was back. And then he has the Achilles. And I'm like, And I saw when he was
pain on the field, his emotion on the field.
That's an Achilles. Like, I'm talking like that's an Achilles. And I was like, I know what that is. I've seen that. And I was like, I felt it was gut wrenching to watch that, because he knew, like, all right, this is it. And I literally looked at him, I'm talking to friends like, okay, that's it. Like, this is the end of the Tre White era in Buffalo, because cap wise, like, they're not going to keep him around. Like, they're going to make a football decision to move on. And if he's healthy, you can come back. Because I had that same speech given to me, like, look, nothing personal. We like you as a player, but if you're healthy, we know what you can do. Right now, you're not healthy. If you can get healthy, come back and see us. And I'm sure that's what the conference looked like. We hate to do it, but, you know, this is the business side of it. And so I wish Tre nothing but the best. But again, you lose a veteran, somebody who can take the pressure off, somebody who could travel with the number one. Now, I love the trade with Rasul Douglas. Like, I mean, that was a great trade to go get, because you brought in another guy that can be
a silver lining in a really shitty, terrible thing that you get.
But Tre's going to be missed. Like, his demeanor, his calmness, his collectiveness. Like, he never got rattled. Like, you know, I think that's the thing. Like, for young players looking, like, Tre was a guy who I watched extensively when he first got here. Like, his breathing was always the same. Like, he never got too high, he never got too low. Like, you never see them try to, like, make it when he make a big play. Like, you never see this, the hoot and the holler, and then he got low. You never saw this. It was always just, I'm gonna be even keel. I'm gonna come back. I'm a recenter, a reset, come back and get ready for the next series. He never got too high or low, and I love that about him. So that, you know, that's why he elevated his game, because he could stay calm in every situation, in every pressure situation, and he studied all the time. Like, he was always in the playbook, and so that was really amazing. And so for a young guy trying to learn what it should look like, that's what those guys were looking at. And so you kind of lose the guy that kind of like, you want to be an elite corner, this is what you do. You lose that when you lose Tre in the locker room.
Yeah, I got to tell you, man, as a first and foremost, as a fan of the football team, I've been a fan, a Buffalo Bills fan my whole life. A lot of players have personalities that I think divides fans. Like, some people love players, some other players can't stand them. I think it was like universal. Like, everyone loved Tre. And my honest, just from a fan perspective, was, without knowing Tre White at all, without, you know, the all the intricacies, but coming back from an ACL, he comes back not good. He got cooked a couple times, like that Bengals game when happened with DeMar. Just, he looked lost, and now I understand now more why at the time. But anyway, I'm like, this is the end for Tre. Then summer next camp, he looked like Tre White. He looked like Tre White. I remember.
You need to have that. Like, you don't like. It's one thing to come back from the injury, but he was off for a while too. So you get rusty.
Sure.
Like, your instincts are a little off. So you got to hone those again, sharpen those again. And then it's just a normal, just when I backpedal, this is when I step and go. And this is the explosion that I need to get here. And he didn't have that because he hadn't been practicing that. And you can never simulate game speed. So when you come into a season late, like he did, he didn't have the benefit of really being ready to go in training camp and going after it and maybe getting a few preseason games. Like, they held him out for all those things.
Right.
I was like, it's not going to look the same. I'm like, but watch next year. And I'm like, he was, woo. I was like, okay, there we go.
I went to a lot of camp practices, and like, I was looking for 2 or 3 things. And right at the very top, how does Tre White look?
Yep.
He looked fantastic. And he looked fantastic in the first month of the season, and up until the injury against Miami. And you bring up a good point. It's not even just what he could do on the field. It's the leadership and what these younger corners learn. Like we talked about, Rasul Douglas, a silver lining from a disaster, because he's been really good with the Bills. I think him getting hurt late in the season, and he played against the Chiefs, but he wasn't Rasul Douglas that we saw because he was injured. I think that really hurt the Bills defense that game. And another thing too with the corners, Christian Benford. We'll talk about him. All right, so he's a 6th-round pick.
6th-round pick.
6th-round pick in a class where Kaiir Elam, they move up, they go get Kaiir Elam. And we'll talk about Kaiir in a second here. But one of the good surprises, I think one of the biggest bright spots from the Bills this past season was, I think Christian Benford, in my opinion, really emerged as a solid, dependable starter, a CB2, like and a good one. Talk about like his progress from just, being a guy on the roster who's a 6th-round pick to being what I would consider going into this coming season a pretty significant part of this defense now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he came in, right, and what you love about him is he relished growing into the position, right? Because you don't know what you need, you don't know what you don't know till you get here, right? And what it means to play. But the moment was never too big for him, and I love seeing corners who can kind of be like, okay, yeah, I get it, I understand. Like, I was a 6th-round draft pick, but put me out there, I'm gonna make plays. And so that's what I watched with him. I'm like, okay, well, they put him out there and he performed. And I remember coming to training camp and just watching, like, who's that guy? And they're like, oh, that's Benford. Like, I'm telling you, like, he's turning heads in camp. I'm like, oh, I like him. Like, hey, if he makes his team, he's going to be solid going forward. So you love watching what he was able to do. And then, but again, he was also there with Tre. Tre was there kind of helping navigate some things with him, right? And even though Tre didn't look like Tre, like, you got to be like, okay, when Tre does this, okay, I do that. Like, and so again, like, taking you get to watch guys. And so he had the benefit of being able to watch. The pressure wasn't on him. Dane Jackson kind of emerged as the guy that if Tre wasn't ready, they would kind of roll him in and do some things. And all of a sudden, when it's like, we need Benford to play, like, he was ready to go. And so that shows me that he was prepared. It shows me that the coaches really got him ready to go. He understood his assignments because they do a lot of things like that. That defense can be a little tricky at times. And so for young guys, it's kind of tough for them to kind of pick up kind of the, hey, we're going to combo, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. When we go here, you go here. They do a lot of mixed coverages and things like that. So it was really fun to watch him come in as a rookie and then come in last year and really just play like, oh, this dude is going to be a solid starter for years to come. And that's one of the ones that hit on. Like, whoever was the scout responsible for finding him, kudos to you, because you found a guy that's going to be a starter in the 6th round, and that doesn't always happen at that position.
You look at that draft, and Kaiir is struggling through his first couple of years, but you got Benford in the 6th round, Terrell Bernard in the 3rd.
Yep,
Terrell looks like,
a good draft.
We talked about him a little bit over dinner. He looks like a superstar right now in the making. Speaking of Kaiir, do you think that being a 1st rounder, just the added pressure, like he's under a microscope a lot, he struggled, and it's not from a lack, from everything I understand anyway, it's not from a lack of, it's not an attitude issue. Right. It's not an issue of him not working hard. It's not an issue of him not paying attention, but things have not clicked for him the way that he would hope for, and that I'm certainly, a lot of fans and his teammates and himself would hope for. Talk about maybe, I don't know, just whether it's being the pressure of having being a 1st-round pick on this team or whatever. And it's too early to give up on him.
Oh, it's absolutely too early
at this point. Is what
way
I'm
too early to give
too.
up on him. He has a lot of talent. He's flashed some sign. Oh, okay, that's the 1st-round talent that you're looking for. But yeah, you're right. I mean, as far as when you think about guys coming in drafted that highly, like, you want to see guys kind of pick it up. And this is where we always talk about system, right? Making sure you get the right fit for the right system. He was primarily a press cover guy coming out of college, right? Like, so when you play press coverage, I can do a couple of things. It's either man-to-man, or I might bail it. I might do some things. We don't always play man-to-man like that. We kind of will show press, kind of do a bail, do some things. So there's a learning curve you have to get of, trying to be not being so overly aggressive in certain coverages. Like, I'm gonna give that up because I want to get back here and protecting this. And so I think sometimes maybe just his nature of I want to cover every route sometimes might have gotten the best of him early in his career. But then also just you've got to be able to learn how to take your speak and make it plain enough for him to understand. And I think that's been the kind of the hard part of him watching it. However they talk and the terminology they use, it hasn't clicked yet for him. And so you kind of have to figure out, all right, how do I take my terminology and then put it into his language so then he can say, oh, the light bulb clicks. And he hasn't had that light bulb moment. And so I know they have some good coaches here, John Butler and the guys that John Butler being gone and Bobby Babbage being there. They have really good coaches. So I think is gonna come back. And I thought I saw him kind of taking a turn, and then he got injured, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shoot, like how many games he's going to miss. So it's going to be interesting to see. But
Get a nice pick in the playoffs against Pittsburgh.
To say people say, well, we should give up, move on. Like, no, you don't give up on him because you got to give him time, and every player is different. But time will tell. And then just like we made a decision with all the big news here a couple days ago, right? Like, when it's time to move on for a player, but I don't think it's time to move on just yet.
I couldn't agree with you more. We're talking Bills Corners here, by the way, on the video side. Like 650 people watching this stream live right now. I'm with Marlon, and I ain't joking, dude. If I didn't know any better and you told me that you're getting ready for Bills camp this summer, that you're trying to get on this roster, I would believe it, man.
I'm not trying to get on camp.
You look like 20 years younger.
That's
than
a young
you
man's
are,
game. Hey, look, if y'all don't play Madden, let me know. Like, I come play some Madden. I got Madden 24 ready to go, but going to training camp,
no, you're good with that. You're good with that. You mentioned him. I mean, I got to bring this up before we get out of here. Stefon Diggs, big news this week. I guess let's start here. What was your level of surprise when you log on to the Twitter machine or whatever it is that you find out and you wake up on a random, seemingly Wednesday, early April morning, a couple of weeks before the draft? It feels like the big trades have happened already. Right. The big signings around the league have already happened. And then on a seemingly early Wednesday or late Wednesday morning, you look and Stefon Diggs, he gets traded to the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I think I was like every other fan, like, what? Like, I grabbed my phone, I'm like, no way. And then I'm like, so I'm trying to go on Twitter, like, all right, is this fake? Is somebody just playing? Is this like a late April Fool's joke and prank that I just missed and it just hit my feed now? And then a friend of mine, I have a good friend who has been like, I'm telling you, like, we've been having this text conversation for the longest of Diggs is not going to be here. I'm telling you, he's not going to be here. I'm like, dude, like, it makes no sense, right? Like, I'm in there like every other fan. It makes no sense. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, maybe next year. And then he's like, I told you. Like, he hits me with the screenshot. I told you. Like, and the only thing I can say back is, you're right. Like you're right. So Rich, you were right. Like, that's all I'm gonna say is, Rich,
you're right, Rich.
Like, that's it. But you go through the whole thing. Like, we talked about it at work. Like, that was like the whole thing we talked about all day at work. Like, in between doing work, somebody's like, you see the news? I'm like, yes, I saw the news. Like, how do you feel? Like, well, I'm still processing it. And I'm trying to go and just listen to everybody else. And everybody had their own thought. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just step back for a second. Right? I'm not even going to worry about it. As a fan, I'm disappointed because I love that 17-14 connection, right? Like, you love watching that. Like, we had 4 years of just, man, this is elite receiver and quarterback play. And together, like, this is amazing. So from that standpoint, I'm like, okay, I got it. And then you start looking at the business aspect of it, right? Like, okay, business aspect wise, when you look at it, okay, it makes sense next year that they're probably going to be out of this contract, right? Because you just look at, like, okay, this is the out.
They had an out after this season.
They had an out after the season. So I was like, okay, so, on one hand, I'm like, okay, maybe it was just a conversation of, let's find what we can get now. And then I was like, I don't know. So I just decided to not go down the rabbit hole of trying to figure it out because I'm not with the organization. So I'm like, I'm not behind the scenes. And at this point, I'm like, it doesn't really matter. I think it was one of those business decisions. It was time to move on. Again, like we talked about, like made the decision with Tre, like, when it's time to move on from a player. And as painful as it is sometimes in the best interest of moving things forward and saying, okay, we need to take care of the organization and where we're going, you have to move on from people. You have to make a business decision. And so I would look at this as the same thing as there was a business decision made, whether I agree with it as a fan or other fans agree with it, or even if it made sense to them. Right. And so as a fan, and out of respect for knowing Brandon Beane and knowing Coach McDermott and knowing even Stefon Diggs as a player, don't look at it as this was prima donna. This was one of those things. I looked at it as the time came for them to part ways, whether it was mutual, whether it was forced on one side or the other. Like, that has no bearing on the decision. The decision was made. It's already over with. So from my standpoint, I'm looking like, look, like, thank you for the memories. Don't have a good game against us when we come to Houston. One.
That's going to be a prime time game. I'll bet
oh
money
my gosh, that's going to be a Sunday night game. Like, they're going to put money on that Sunday night, maybe Monday night, but more than likely, I would probably put that at 8:00 Sunday night because everybody's going to tune in to watch that.
Yeah, so a lot of the moves they made during the offseason, the cuts, some restructures. Like, for an example, Dawson Knox taking kind of a pay cut, but sort of a restructure that commits him to being in Buffalo through next year as well. Right. I thought it was interesting, and a lot of other people did too. They didn't touch Stefon's contract. Like, had they restructured it and moved some to gain some money now, that might have made it harder to get out of that contract after this year.
Right.
So I think that was part of the reason for the expectation. He'll be here next year or this year. Let's see how things go, and then maybe they move on from him. Look, as a player, he didn't have 4 of the best years any receivers ever had. Or he had the best 4 years that in the history of this franchise.
Yes.
No one has ever put up numbers in the history of this franchise. Andre Reed is a Hall of Famer, and he did it for a longer period of time.
Yes.
I'm talking about a 4-year stretch. No one has ever done what he's done on the football field. Even with the back half of last year, the number dropped, which, again, can be a lot of different factors. And you know what? Let's actually hit that right now, because I don't want to forget this while we're talking about it. When we were having our wings here at Imperial, we talked about, the number production drop and Khalil Shakir and some of these guys emerging. And you brought up a great point to me, and it resonated with me. The attention that Stefon Diggs still got on that football field, even if he wasn't getting as many catches for as many yards, he was hoping to open up opportunities for guys like Kincaid and Shakir. So kind of elaborate for people as a defensive back, because you would know this, how that opened up more opportunities for some of these guys to really step up when he wasn't putting up the numbers.
Yeah, I think we were talking about just how, the argument was, well, some people on Twitter was like, good riddance. Like, he faded anyway. They don't need him. And I'm like, okay. I mean, whether that's true or not, time will tell. I think the one benefit that Shakir, because everyone pointed to, well, what about Kincaid? Like, what did he do? And look at how he emerged in the second half. And look at Shakir. And I think they're going to be great young players going forward. And I expect their trajectory to continue to rise. But you can't discount the fact that you still have Stefon Diggs on the field. And how they motioned and moved him around and put him in different situations. You got the matchups, the one-on-one matchups that you wanted by moving Diggs, because Diggs was the true number one receiver in the offense that everyone's like, we need to know where he is at all times. And if you're going to roll coverage, the role is dictated on where Diggs is going to be and where he lines up. If you're going to double him and you're going to take a person, put it there and put it on top, or you're going to bring somebody underneath, those things is always predicated on where he's going to be. So those guys were going to always have the benefit of having Diggs on the field and then getting one-on-one matchups that you could exploit. And Joe Brady, I thought, did a really good job of taking advantage of that and moving them. So while Stefon Diggs' production did slip a little bit, some of that was also by design of, we're going to take advantage of how they're going to play Stefon and run a route to complement that behind it, or run a route to complement that under it. And this is where the read's going to be. And Josh did a good job of getting those guys the ball in rhythm on time. And so that's kind of what the one that's when I heard Travis, like, that's the one thing I'm like, well, who's going to be that guy now that is going to still be like, I need to make sure I know where he is on the field at all times. And so as a fan, you're like, I'm nervous about that. But as a person who understands football business, like, there's still time. Like, the roster isn't set now. And I think Brandon Beane said that in his press conference. Like,
said it a lot of million times.
Up until September. Like, there's going to be guys that they're going to come and get, like, via trade, via this, via that. You're going to have an opportunity to go in and add what you need, whether that's a young player, whether that's a veteran, whether that's a couple of young players and a couple of veterans. It's just right now, you had to do some things business wise. And while we may not look, we don't know behind the scenes in it, it may not be ideal to us. It was something that as an organization said, it's time to make this move. We need to make this move now. And whether it takes a little bit to get our footing back and get where we need to go, okay, we're going to do that. And I have the utmost faith that they're going to do that as an organization, because as a fan, I'm like, look, I'm going to be there cheering regardless. Like, I'm going to be there right there. I mean, I'll be cheering from home, but but I'm going to be cheering nonetheless.
You know what? And we talked about this as well. Josh Allen is great and elite as he is, and he does some things that no other quarterback does. Couple touch passes away from Stefon's numbers in the back half of the year looking a lot better, because again, he cooked a couple DBs. It was open deep, and Josh just missed them. Now you're going to, a lot of people are going to remember the drop against Kansas City.
Absolutely.
Stefon addressed it. He knows it was a play he needed to make, and he didn't, which, it sucks that he dropped the ball. Okay. No, I don't want no dancing around that here, but it's not like Ronnie Harmon at the end of a playoff game, and that was the end. With respect to Ronnie Harmon, I'm saying they had a whole drive still, and they drove all the way down inside the 20 later on that drive. Not to take away the significance of him dropping the ball. All right, I'm just saying. My point is, at least some of that production, a couple better Josh Allen throws, and we're not talking about Stefon only having 300 some yards over the last 7 games. You're talking about 500 some yards, something like that. How do you think, and not whether he deserves to be, but how do you think ultimately Stefon gets remembered here? Because to me, it's an enigma. Tre White, universal.
Right.
Man, I love Tre. Man, we all miss Tre. Stefon is a different cat. He's a wide receiver one, man. And these people are just weird. Now, you play quarterback, you play corner. If you were a wide receiver one, I might call you weird as well. So
if I was wide receiver one, I'd be
man.
weird,
You guys got your own personality. You're they're alphas, all right? So there's nuances to all of them. But, the cryptic tweets and what is he saying right now? And just sometimes not talking to the media maybe as much as the media, of course, wants him to. Not necessarily that his fault, because he never said anything bad publicly about the Bills. But what I'm telling you is that kind of a lightning rod for water cooler debate has been Stefon Diggs.
Always,
how do you think he's ultimately going to be remembered here in Buffalo?
I think ultimately, he gets remembered as what you said, a guy who was dynamic, who did something in 4 years that has never been seen in this organization, who yardage wise he put up over that 4-year stretch was amazing. I mean, like, still, and we can sit up here and go like whether he's cryptic, whether he's this, whether he's that, right? I think Stefon Diggs is a number one wide receiver, an alpha wide receiver who wants the ball, right? Like Michael Irvin, when I was playing, wanted the ball. Like Jerry Rice, who wanted the ball. Like, those guys want the ball. They want to have the biggest stage on their back. And the one thing I would say about Stefon, and I know, like, because I read Twitter. I don't tweet a lot, but I read Twitter. I just like to read the comments because it's fun to read the comments, right? And some fans are sensitive. I think, anybody that talked about the drop, like, the last thing I'm going to remember is the drop, like, then just get out of your feelings, because right now you're still in your feelings of the fact that he dropped the pass. Yeah, like, he dropped it. Like, he didn't hide from it. He didn't say anything like, oh,
I feel like he's owned it.
He was like, look, I owned it. Like, and so I think those are the things where once we kind of get out of our feelings and kind of say, okay, this is it. Like, you step back and you look at the totality of what he done, and especially as a Buffalo Bill, you're gonna look like, look, there'll be tears. There'll be people talking about, all right, new stadium, Stefon should probably get up on the wall of fame at some point in time for what he did, and how he handled himself. But yeah, I mean, I say people to say, well, he was a DB, he was this. Like, this is us, because as media folk, we fill in the blanks, right? Like, when you don't talk to us, then you leave us to fill in the blanks. And so it's kind of like, well, I'm trying to read his body language. Well, he looked like he wasn't happy today. Like, I never heard him say he wasn't happy in Buffalo. I never heard any teammates say anything bad about him, right? Like, you never heard any teammates say, well, man, he's tough to play with. Nope. Only thing they ever say was like, this dude works. He's going to come in. I know on Sunday he's going to be ready to play. If it's a Sunday night game, a Monday night game, a Thursday night game, he will be ready to play.
He was really durable in these 4 years, too. He didn't miss games, man.
So from that standpoint, like he didn't miss games. He played. He did everything. He played hurt. Yeah. He came and did all those things. So I think once we kind of step back out of the fact that, and that's the thing about it, right? Like, when you have a guy like Tre White, Tre's different. His personality is different. He's transparent. He's going to answer the questions. Tre is going to answer the questions the way we would want somebody to answer this question, right? Like Steph is going to be a little different. He's going to be like, I don't know, like, and so when he doesn't answer the way we think he should answer, or if we think that if we perceive there's a problem, then people are kind of like,
we fill in the blanks.
He's rich, he's this, he's that. So we fill in the blanks and try to make something sometimes that maybe this we make things out of it that maybe it shouldn't be. And so that's kind of how we are. That's human nature. We always go to fill in the blanks. And so, that's it. Like, at this page, I'm like, because I was like, should I call? Should I try to figure out what's going on? Like, you know what? I'm turning the page. Like, I'm turning the page just like the organization turned the page. And that's the advice I would give any fan. Like, well, how do you move? Look, you move on. You go ahead and say, listen, this dude was a hell of a player here. Like, he was an amazing player here with us. He gave us 4 years of great memories. He made some amazing catches. During that time, he put up great numbers. And his time came. And we will never know why his time came. And somebody may say, I've heard this, I've heard that. Cool. Like, can you verify it? Then I'm like, that's pure conjecture. And again, we're filling in the blanks. Unless he come out and says it, or the Bills come out and say it, I will take it as it's all conjecture. And at this point, we've moved on. And again, good luck over there in Houston. And okay, I'm turning my like, I'm excited about the draft. I'm sitting like, oh my gosh, like,
it does put everything in play.
We can do a whole lot of things in this draft. We can trade picks, we can do stuff. I'm looking forward to June 1st to see what veterans get released. Like, I'm like, we have an opportunity to go get somebody who maybe somebody thought was washed up that still has something left in their tank. I'm like, this is exciting as a fan and as a former player. Like, I'm looking forward to it. And guys should be like, look, this is going to be really fun to watch and see what the organization can do and turn this into.
The last thing I'll say about Stefon is this. First of all, the last tweet he made the night before he got traded, I actually agreed with him.
I agree with it
I mean,
too.
100%. The person was suggesting that he wasn't essential to Josh Allen, and he absolutely was essential.
Absolutely.
And just like Josh Allen was essential to Stefon Diggs over the last 4 years as well. They
needed
worked
each other.
together. Exactly.
They
You said that. They needed each other. Here's a fun fact about Stefon Diggs. Not a lot of people know this. I did the research, found this on the show. I talked about it last week. There's only 4 receivers in the entire history of the NFL ever who have had 4 consecutive seasons with at least 100 catches in a year. Only 4 in the history of the NFL. Antonio Brown, he did it 6 times, 6 years in a row. Marvin Harrison, Devontae Adams, who's 4 in current, and Stefon Diggs, 4 in current. He's one of 4 receivers in NFL history to have 100 catches 4 straight years. And I do think people are in their feels right now.
Oh, yeah.
Understandably, though, to be fair. And as time goes on, I think, and the emotion comes out
we'll get
of
better.
it.
I mean, that's us as fan base, like, because you feel like, all right, they traded him. Like, it's almost like a slight to us. Like, did you ask for this? Like, you know, you should be here. You know, we embraced you. We brought you in. We loved you. And so now it feels like the love that we gave is not reciprocated, right?
Yeah,
and so you're like, man, forget you, dude. Like, I'm cutting up my jersey. I'm doing like, don't go LeBron and start burning up. Like, no, I'm just kidding. but that's the business, and sometimes it's tough to accept the business side of it. But I think Bean said it a long time ago, right? Like, it comes for all of us, whether you get traded or released. It's going to happen to every player, every coach. That's just the nature of the game. Like, it's just. Yeah. At some point in time, this business is going to get you, and whether you like it, whether you agree with it, that's the part of being a part of the National Football League. And if you can't handle it, then you're going to find yourself out of the league really quickly. So it's one of those crazy things. Only thing I would say I want to mention, and it's not even football related to that. I just want to say, give all my condolences to Vontae Davis' family, Vernon Davis and his family, because I think we all enjoyed the conversation that Tre and everybody was talking about that day that it happened, but. Man, like, you don't want to see any player who was a hell of a player in his own right, Pro Bowler, 20-plus interceptions, 300-plus tackles. I mean, this guy was definitely a really good football player. And, to see the demise and just wake up and read like, oh, shoot, like, Vontae Davis passed away. Like, so definitely want to make sure we stop and just, give our props to his family and celebrate the career that he had as a player because – I don't want the last punchline to be like, oh, well, he retired at halftime. Like, he was still a really good football player. So
and a human being,
and a guy who was 35 years old and family. So definitely my prayers and condolences to his family.
Yeah, that's it. You know what? I'll tell you what, that's a great way to end this show. I want to thank the people watching this live. It's actually more than normal too, man. We're way over 700 people who have been watching this, following along on the video side live. So I want to thank all of you. I want to thank again Imperial Pizza as always. This is like my home away from home, man. Whenever if I'm out in my studio doing a show, I absolutely love coming here. Great atmosphere, great vibe, great wings. And last but not least, I want to thank my man, Marlon Kerner. This was a really fun conversation, man. I enjoyed it. You know what's crazy? We're ending this now at about a minute 12 or something like that, or hour 12. I swear to God, man, I could go another
we can
2
keep
hours.
Talking. Anybody got some questions? Yo, send some questions in the chat. Like, go ahead, shoot them at us. Let them know.
All right, guys. For Marlon, I'm Patrick. Thank you very much. I'll be back. Have a good weekend. New shows again coming on Monday. Take care.